focused on workplace culture today. Jesse and I are extremely excited to have some of our amazing community members leading this conversation and, who I would call really some friends in my head. So just really excited that you all are here with us today. These Ask Me Anything series are an opportunity for us and our Culture First community to come together, to collaborate, ideate, and share best practices with each other and learn from each other because you all are a part of this together. And so we really want to create this space where you can edify each other. And so we're so grateful that you've added us to your to-do list today and that you've decided to jam out with us. And so I'm going to quickly introduce Jesse and myself, and then Jesse's going to take us into our core principles here in the Culture First community. So it's my amazing colleague, Jesse Jacob, who is hailing out of Kansas City, Missouri, home of the Chiefs, the champions in the United States. Jesse oversees our global chapters program here. We have over 106 global chapters across the globe in 83 cities and 20 countries. If you're not a part of it, please join our global chapters program at chapters.culturefirst.com. And then it's me, Demario Bell. I oversee our digital communities, which is our People Geek Slack community. We have over 25,000 global members across the globe who decide to jam out with us every day on all things people and culture. And so I am calling out of San Francisco, California in the United States, but I am a Midwest boy through and through. So I'm so happy that y'all are here. Jesse, over to you.
Oh, thanks, Demario. This is the best. All right, so we have now 100 global chapters around the world, and we have this large digital community with over 30,000 people. But who are we? We are a group of people around the world united in the shared belief that a better world of work is possible, and by golly, we're willing to do something about it. We have 5 core principles in the Culture First community. We think of this as like our glue that holds us all together. We're talking about all sorts of topics around the future of work, but these are the things that hold us together, how we agree to show up with one another. And this is, you could think of like, this is our culture within the Culture First community. So the first core principle is fostering belonging and acceptance. We are all about creating environments where folks feel like they can come and feel seen, heard, valued, and appreciated for just being themselves. We are all about having the willingness to reflect and grow. So we are on a mission to transform how we work around the world. That comes to us starting the work in our organizations. But initially that starts with us being the change we want to see in the world. So turning that mirror around and saying, how am I showing up? What can I do? What's my part in all of this? The third one's having the courage to be vulnerable. We are, we show up all day with our masks or our belonging badges, if you will. So, I'm a daughter and I'm an athlete and I consider myself an extrovert. But underneath all of that, I'm just a human being. So we want people to have permission to take off their belonging badges. And really, we're just humans underneath all of that. And if I do that, then it creates more trust and psychological safety for us to be doing this amazing work together. The fourth core principle is putting learning into action. So we are all about reflecting. We didn't want this to just be you consume information, it's in one ear and out the other. We want you to be inspired to take action. Let's keep the conversation going in People Geek Slack afterwards of what are we doing? What are we committed to taking action on? How can we keep this momentum going? And then the last core principle is connection inside, business outside. This is just a fancy way of saying that this is not your networking group. This is not another place to push business cards or get sold anything. Yes, this is a community sponsored by Culture Amp, but at the end of the day, we're all just human beings and we're here to do the work first. If that leads to us doing business outside, that's awesome. But connection is the primary purpose of our gathering. So this is how we agree to show up with one another. If you all are up for that, give me like a little thumbs up reaction and I'll hand it back to you, Demario.
My goodness, Jesse, aren't you amazing? I mean, I love when you do our core values connection. And so I am going to take a moment to introduce our panelists before we dive into our first question today. And so I want to take a little moment and share a little about each of our panelists, starting with my friend, Dale Smith. Dale is the Director of Culture and Engagement at the Global Strategy Group. They are a leading strategic communications and research firm specializing in data-driven insights and public relations consulting. Jill is based out of our nation's capital here in the US, Washington, D.C. Thank you so much, Jill. I also want to take a moment to introduce Becky Pratt. Becky is the head of people and culture at Microverse. They are an ed tech coding bootcamp that offers remote, globally distributed learning for aspiring software developers. Becky is based out of Madrid, Spain, by way of where I am from, Michigan, go blue. And I also want to introduce someone who I've also long admired in our community, someone who's been a thought leader to me and someone who I've gone to for advice when needed. Sara Bokhari. Now, I'm gonna tell y'all this, Sara is the real deal. I mean, I deeply admire Sara. Sara is a career HR practitioner, most recently serving as VP of HR before taking on a new role at a new organization, BES, Building Excellent Schools, as Chief Operating Officer. So facilities, IT, HR, among other things, are reporting up to Sara. They are a nonprofit organization based in Boston, Massachusetts, here in the United States, and they focus on the development of urban charter schools as a method for preparing underserved student populations for college and careers. And Sara is based out of the Chicagoland area in the United States. And then last but not least, someone who is a top contributor in our community, Natasha Delisle-Barrow, who is simply amazing. Natasha is the head of people and culture at GooseChase. They are a popular mobile app and platform that allows users to create and participate in interactive scavenger hunts, making team building and event planning more fun and engaging. It's a versatile tool for both recreational activities and educational experiences. And Natasha is based in London, England. As you can see, we are all over the world today. And so super excited that you're here. I do want to take a moment to remind you to make the most of today's session by asking thought-provoking questions, share your experiences, and also to engage in some meaningful discussions. This is your opportunity to tap into the collective wisdom of our community insights and also to maybe propel you on your own journey. And so I do want to say there will be no time at the end for questions. And so Jesse and I, we ask you, should you have a question, please raise your hand and then we will call on you in between responses. So feel free to, raise your hand throughout because there won't be any time. We have so much to cover today. All righty. All right, so let's dive into today's discussion. We're going to go ahead and kick things off and I'm going to start this question with Becky. And this is going to be for all the panelists. So Becky, let's start with you. Can you tell us, what does culture mean to you and how have you witnessed it involved in your workplace?
Yeah, thanks for the wonderful introductions of all of us, Demario and Jesse. It's so great to be here. To me, when I think of workplace culture, it is every interaction, every communication, every policy, every hire, every picture you put on the wall if you have a physical office and that's your thing. It is literally everything that people see, hear, and feel about your company when they're part of it, when they're working with their peers, when they're working with their leader. It is literally everything, and it's impacted by everything. So every time you bring a new person into the fold, the culture changes a little bit. Every time you have a change in business direction, the culture will change. Every time you maybe go through a tough time together, the culture will change. So since it's made up of every interaction, it's impacted by every interaction.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Becky. Dale, I'm going to send it over to you.
Absolutely. For me, when I think of culture, I think in an organizational way, it's the personality of your company. So we all have our values and companies have their values too, but the culture, I feel, is the way that those values show up each and every day as we behave and going about our work, how we interact, how we move through the world. Even within an organization, that personality is its culture. I've been able to witness a lot of different organizational cultures. I've worked in the military, I've worked for a nonprofit, I've worked for small business, and every company has their own unique culture. I think the thing that we have to remember that you need to set your intentions about what kind of culture you want to have, because there will always be a culture. If you don't determine it, it will evolve on its own based on the behaviors of everybody of the company. But that's what culture means to me. It's how those values are shown in everyday interactions and going about the work.
Yeah, culture is always happening regardless. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Del.
Yeah.
Natasha, what do you think?
So really, I think it's just really building on what both Del and Becky have said. You know, I don't disagree with any of that at all, in actual fact. One of the things that I definitely know now is that culture is so much more intentional than it ever has been. It used to be before that, it was very much a top-down directive. It was almost like you would have business leaders telling you what sort of culture that they wanted or things had to be, when in actual fact, culture is actually determined not just by the people within our organizations, but also around the societies in which we serve. And so culture does come in externally as well. So when you look at the customers that we serve, the markets that we compete within, that those will also have a bearing on culture. The language around culture has also evolved. We no longer talk about culture fit. We always talk about culture add, or we should be talking about culture add. Because if you're not talking about culture add, then you're not sort of allowing culture to breathe or to evolve or to adapt in the way that it has to. And we talk about culture being meaningful relationships, but also it's become so much more than that as well. It's not just the differentiator of our companies, but it's also encompassing things like the well-being of people, that sense of belonging for people as well. We also need to look at how infrastructure shows up as representing our culture as well. So it's all those different things. I don't think there's any one way to necessarily describe it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you talk about how our customers and our societies play a role in shaping our own cultures as well, because I've also seen that play out in other organizations I've been at. Thank you, Natasha. Sara, coming over to you.
Yeah, just +1 to everything that everybody has said. So absolutely, it's our values, it's our behaviors, it's our norms, but all of that is governed by the systems and the structures that we put into place. And literally everything impacts culture. So you can even think about building design. How did we set up our desks? And what does that say about how we're going to engage with each other or not engage with each other? Do we allow remote work or not? All those decisions end up impacting culture. And like Del said, if we're not intentional about setting culture, we'll unintentionally still set culture. And so it is always better to be intentional about it so we can shape it in the way that we want to. And Demario, you asked a second part to that question around how have you witnessed it evolve in your workplace? And that one really struck me because I'm reading a book right now called The Social Brain that talks about these tipping points in terms of size that shift how culture shows up or how we experience it. And it's based on Dunbar's numbers. So some of those numbers are 5, 15, 30, 50, 150, 500, and 1500. And just being really thoughtful about when you know you're going to meet one of those numbers in terms of scale or size, that maybe how you design culture should change as well, because those are tipping points. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you all for those insightful responses. I'm going to come right back to you, Sara and Del, just to build on our first question. In your opinion, in your experience, who holds the responsibility for shaping and nurturing workplace culture?
I'll go ahead and jump in if you don't mind, Del, so that I can pull the book while you're talking, and I'll drop it into the chat. But I always talk about culture as being owned by the 3 Ds. So those are your designers, your deciders, and your directors. So when you think about anybody who designs a system or a process, they're impacting culture, whether that is designing performance management systems or even designing collateral for clients, you're impacting culture. Deciders are the people who are deciding which work products or work projects do we put in front of people. They're deciding what is the collateral that does or doesn't go out. And then directors are the folks, and I just kind of use that as a person who has authority in an organization. So director level and above, just by title, you have a seat at some table in which you are influencing culture. I used to kind of not think about these categories and just be like, well, everybody owns culture. And it's true, everybody influences culture. But when I think about who owns it, who has a heightened responsibility, I really think about those 3 Ds, the deciders, designers, and directors.
Love that. Thank you. Go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said, Sara. I think about it a little bit differently, and I do still believe that shaping the culture is the responsibility of the leaders of the company. I call them the big L leaders. They're your executive team, the CEOs, the C-suite, the people who are setting the direction of the company. But I feel like the responsibility for nurturing it and living it out lies with each and every individual. The behaviors that we exhibit toward one another either support the culture that we want to have or detracts from the culture. And I think at different levels throughout the organization, you have different levels of responsibility for nurturing. When I think about people leaders and leading teams, you have a different level of responsibility in shaping. You need to work those kinds of conversations into your one-on-ones and your performance evaluation, because if we are going to maintain the culture we want, we need to see that playing out. We can't see undermining of that culture in everyday behavior. If we think about a family or a household, the leaders of that household say, this is how we're going to treat each other at home. We're not going to speak this way to one another or what have you, but everybody has that responsibility of leaning in and helping to guide and direct what that really looks like on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, I love that. It also, I would say, Dale, it's like co-creating together. Everyone has that ownership and has that part on what that looks like for them, because as you all mentioned, a part of culture is that sense of belonging. And so I think, to your point, we all have a role in that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. There's a phrase that I don't want to miss because it's come up recently in some online conversations and it has stuck with me. And it was, your culture is only as good as the worst behavior that it tolerates. And so when we think about that, no matter what kind of guiding principles our leadership sets for culture, if the company allows behavior that is counterintuitive or destructive to that culture, it's going to come down a notch. It's going to start to become that counterintuitive behavior. So yeah, good, Becky.
I love that, Becky. Yes, what you permit, you promote. So true. Absolutely. Well, I'm coming back over to you, Becky, and to Natasha. Why do you think leadership can sometimes be resistant to change and viewing culture as Pandora's box, or just viewing change as Pandora's box? And then the second part to that question is, how can this resistance impact organizations and its employees?
Shall I kick off? Okay, so that first part, I mean, you can answer that in so many ways. And I think I've worked with so many different leaders that I've seen reluctance show up for a variety of reasons, if truth be known. However, one of the key things that I often see is the reluctance can actually come about through lack of understanding. And what we can sometimes see is that there is this lack of understanding very much at a senior level around the role that culture actually plays in business success, and not equating culture to strategic goals. So the way that I have seen that, for example, is where I've seen leaders go, but surely all we need to do is, just do what Netflix did. Or why don't we just take that and just repurpose it? Or, do we really need to spend time on this? Does it really matter? And so I think one of the things that I definitely see is those leaders who just really don't understand what it is. The second thing that I've also noticed is that if you do open that Pandora's box, and like a lot of things, if you acknowledge there's a problem, it means you've got to fix it. You've got to do something about it. And this is where things can get very tricky, because with culture, it's such a myriad of things. It touches upon so many different things that it's kind of like, well, where do you start with it? How do you tackle it? Where do you go with it? And how do you know that you've got there? How do you know it's better? And so again, it's those type of things. But in terms of looking at impact, your turnover of top talent, for example, people are leaving your company. that is usually something to do with culture, whether it's to do with leadership, whether it's to do with job design or job work, whether it's to do with the way that information is shared or decisions are made. It also will then impact your ability to attract and hire, top performers or top talent, the people you need to actually move your business forward. And that's how it can show up. There's also that aspect where there's a lack of trust. If there's a lack of trust within an organization, because that's cultural as well, a lack of psychological safety, well, that creates a fear of failure. And that in itself then hampers things like innovation, creativity. And so what you eventually start to see is a business that slowly or quickly starts to stagnate, starts to look like it's waddling through mud, and eventually, and at worst, decline. So I think in those respects, what we can do, and I suppose really adding a third part to the question, is looking at the ways in which we address leadership's reluctance is through almost that bottom line, impact, how it stops the business from growing or succeeding.
I love that. Thank you so much, Natasha.
The only thing I have to add to your extraordinarily eloquent answer, Natasha, is uncertainty. Leaders, especially leaders who don't have a lot of psychological safety, either with themselves, with their peers, with their boss, with the company, can see change as an opportunity to bring uncertainty into the mix. And with uncertainty comes vulnerability, which, I mean, I don't want to take too many pages out of Brene Brown's book, but vulnerability is the basis of everything when you're showing up as a compassionate, empathetic, and, effective leader, in my opinion. When you start changing, especially culture, you can't necessarily put your hands around it and control it. You have to do your best to create the pathway that the company will go on, and you hope at the end that it'll come out the way you want. So it's just opening uncertainty and opening the door for uncertainty is super hard for a lot of leaders. I mean, myself included. I don't love uncertainty, but I do love change. And I think I'm one of those odd people in the group that's ooh, let's try a new thing. Let's see what happens. And for a lot of people, that is anxiety inducing. So I think uncertainty gets in the way of a lot of leaders when they start thinking about opening the box to change, any kind of change, but culture change specifically. And I love what you said, Natasha, about having a hard time measuring culture. I mean, we can do all of the engagement surveys that we want and see how people are feeling about their own situation, but to get a reliable, effective set of metrics on how do I measure this company's culture, I mean, put 10 HR people in a room and you'll get 25 different answers on how to do this. So it's super, super difficult to do, super hard to show results. And I think that breeds more uncertainty in it. So how does this impact the organization? Well, just like you said, Natasha, you have high performers, you have people that you want to retain that are more willing to vote with their feet than stick around and go through this seemingly impossible task of getting leaders to get on board with changing culture. So you see turnover happen a lot faster than you can change a culture. If people want a different method of deciding or a different personality of leadership or a different composition of an executive team, it's faster, and in some cases, maybe this market excluded, easier to go out and find a new job where you believe you have those things than to sit and face the difficult uphill climb to change that and to get leaders to go on board with you.
Boom. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Becky. Del, sorry, anything you want to add to that before we move on? Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Yeah, so much goodness there from both of you, Becky and Natasha. One of the things that comes to mind with that, especially as you're talking about change, Becky, is there's often things about your culture that are the pillars that don't need to change, even when there are other pieces. One of my favorite books by Kevin Oakes is Culture Renovation. And if you think about a home, when you're going to renovate, the first thing you do is go through that home and think, what's staying? What do we not want to change? I love this fireplace. I love this, whatever, but let's update the things that need updating. And so when you have that mindset, it allows you to evolve. 2020 taught us that there were things that needed to change about companies. I think about one of them being the staggering numbers of people who never used to work remotely that work remotely now. And we were forced into some of that change. But I feel like a culture should be that all the time. You should be growing and learning and renovating the things that need to evolve while protecting those pillars that make you uniquely your business and your organization and maintain that success. And when you can get that balance right, the sky's the limit.
I could jump in and I just want to add a little bit of a sprinkle of some real talk also. And say that they're absolutely one of the reasons that leaders tend to be resistant to change, because it often means that their sense of power is challenged. And that's uncomfortable, right? And sometimes it's necessary. And here, at least in the United States, I'd say a lot of power is concentrated around white supremacist culture and strict structures and systems. So yes, we might do everything we can within our power to design a healthy, thriving culture internally in our organizations. We are still always going to feel the pressure of that larger culture in the places we live pushing in on us, influencing how we show up, how we feel, the default decisions that we make sometimes without thinking, because they're just part of how we breathe and the fabric of our lives and what we know. So I don't want to lose sight of that fact also. I think power structures and systems, whether it's capitalism, white supremacy, other things, are also influencing why some leaders are resistant. And that is a tough nut to crack. That takes a long, long time.
I definitely say that's so
Yeah.
true. Just to echo that as well, in terms of that old style of command and control. Culture has still been built very much on this industrial age of work. And we are no longer in that industrial age of work. You know, we have evolved. We're now in this digital age where we're seeing different things, whether it's technology, different interventions, different events. So not just the pandemic, for example, but also there was the Great Resignation immediately after the pandemic, which forced companies to take an inward look. When the next change now is to do with AI and how we use generative AI in the workplace, and that's going to in itself lead to another sort of change in working style and culture. And so where you have companies who have established themselves with top-down waterfall style command and control, which was fit for the industrial age, we are now in an age where actually culture has to be a lot more agile and it has to be more networked. And so we're still not quite caught up with that. We can do it, and we showed we can do it during the pandemic. We moved to it pretty fast. You know, when you think of all the companies out there that are working remotely, hybridly, or whatever, we did do it. But what holds us back constantly is this leadership model, this command and control model.
Yeah. And I'll just throw one more point of view in there. We talked a little bit about it when we talked about belonging, but when we actually get to the diversity piece of companies, and Sara, when you talked about the systems that are at play, you know, one of the ones that goes without saying is the patriarchal system. And as more women are climbing in the workforce and expanding their career goals, aspirations, capabilities, all of those systems really don't work if there's not true diversity within organizations, whatever that diversity needs to look like, so that people feel like there is representation. We have all these conversations about representation in our nation, in our world. We need to be having them in our companies as well. And that's what fosters that agility that you talk about, Natasha, that psychological safety to offer a differing opinion or solution or idea, and not be told, well, that's the way we've always done it, and your idea has no place here.
Boom.
I wonder, like, as we're talking about power structures and agility, if leaders who in, you know, the kind of traditional company infrastructure are usually the ones who have been around for the longest time and maybe have some more of those deep-seated industrial age ideas. And when you start getting people from the bottom, who we all recognize everybody can influence the culture and should be, if they maybe get a little bit threatened in their power structure by those people from the bottom, the newbies, the new generation, the people who, you know, haven't been around long enough to appreciate, you know, the culture of this place. And if that maybe leads to some of the resistance to change, the like, I know better than you kind of mentality that comes with those structures. It's a question I've just started thinking about. So thanks for that.
Yeah, that's a good one, Becky. I've been in conversations where we talk about this newer generation of professionals coming up, and many of them moving forward will never have known a time when you worked 40 hours in a week or 50 hours in a week in an office. There wasn't some hybrid version. And that can be scary to those of us who come from a generation where working remotely was not even an option. The technology wasn't there, the willingness wasn't there. But you're right, Becky, that we've never done it that way. What do they know kind of thing has to get put aside for organizations to excel and their cultures to be healthy and robust.
Love that. Oh, thank you all so much. This was really, really, really juicy. Right on time. I love this. This is open to any of you, and so feel free to like dive into this one. And it is something that you mentioned, you know, Dill, at the beginning about how, you know, culture is always happening. And so this is about subculture. So can you share a personal experience where a subculture within your organization turned negative, and then how was it handled?
That's an interesting concept. I do feel like while I haven't seen subcultures really turn negative, I've seen some negative things come from subcultures. And it's all about how the organization handles it, I believe. I've been at organizations where there are subcultures by sub-company, multiple companies within one organization, and the way they work and what they do requires that they have their own subculture. I think when organizations at their top understand that segments of their population need their own cultures to get work done, or maybe it's generational. The Gen Zers have their own subculture from, I'm going to date myself here. Technically, I'm a baby boomer. I don't really identify as one, but you know, we work differently. We have different experiences. I think that's okay. Where it turns negative, and where I've seen it turn negative, is when the subcultures and the different parts of the company aren't clear on what expectations are, what the processes are, what the recognition is, so that they don't see themselves represented, or when they go to lean into a behavior of the culture and are told, oh, that's really not for you. You don't get to raise your hand and say that. That's where the negativity may come from. Oh, this looks great on paper, but I don't see it playing out in my everyday work and place in the company. That's where that can happen. I think the course correction for that is to, again, communicate and make space for people to challenge ideas. Even if you're not going to change, let them be heard. Welcome their points of view and make them feel valid and appreciated for bringing a different point of view.
Thank you, Dale.
I have two experiences as part of mergers and acquisitions that it's always touch and go and hairy in an M&A. And I think I've learned so much about the importance of culture and how you can recognize how it's showing up in ways that you don't expect. So the first M&A I was part of, there was a global telecommunications company. And if anyone has looked at my LinkedIn, they can probably tell which company I was at when this happened. But they acquired the company I was working at, and the division of the company I was working at was even a subsidiary of that company. So almost overnight, we had to integrate a subsidiary into the parent company and then integrate into the acquiring company. And the businesses were totally different. We're talking like apples and oranges. And the global acquiring company, I think that they thought they understood what the culture of this completely different industry, this completely different company, and then this completely different subsidiary really, really had. And all of the the cultures around it. So different locations as well. Each industry had its own culture within it as well. And so to do this like multi-layered acquisition where the now deciders and the directors, to use Sara's words, didn't understand and did not take the time to understand the business that they were acquiring, aside from the numbers and dollars and cents on the balance sheet, it really backfired. They ended up selling off the company that they acquired several years later. So they're no longer connected. And even that subsidiary that I was part of is now part of a different company that was also sold off from the big parent company. And I do think it came down to not just a misunderstanding about what it took to run the business, but a misunderstanding about what kind of people and what kind of systems, processes, and ultimately culture end up happening in those organizations. And the second acquisition I was part of, it was a US West Coast, Seattle-based, as West Coast stereotypical as you could be, being acquired by a large global technology umbrella company. And that company does M&As for basically all of their growth is inorganic. And our acquisition of my little West Coast US startup actually kind of broke the model for how they do culture evaluation during an M&A, because it just went so incredibly sideways. So I think that leaders oftentimes, when they're looking at these things, they undervalue the importance of culture. They undervalue the impact of culture when you're bringing a large group of people in inorganically like this. And so I would say that's my best example of subcultures not really fitting in. And it was super interesting.
Thank you, Becky.
I was going to just add, I have a very similar experience to Becky's as well. Myself and as an ex-colleague on this chat today, having worked with a company that merged. And what we had was not just different cultures because of the styles of the businesses or the two absolute giants in their industries at the time, but also as well, what we had was geographical cultural differences. And that also had to be recognized. You know, if you have got a team that is Swedish, for example, and they have their cultures, their rituals, their ways of doing things, and then you have a team that's in the UK, but even within the team within the UK, you have a team which is reporting to another team elsewhere, and that in itself can also create sort of all these different subcultures. And I think one of the things that has to be very, very clear, because, and certainly one of the things that I notice with investors, I've been lucky enough to work with VCs in terms of due diligence when they're looking to invest in companies. One of the things that they will look at is the culture audit. Are the leaders in the business communicating a vision and a culture that everyone can get behind? And that's almost like a key question that I'm seeing investors ask now. So that's great at that high level. And I think subcultures do work. And I think you need to have subcultures. Without subcultures, you know, you're not creating a sense of belonging. You're not looking after diversity, and you're certainly not including. So you do need to have it there. But when it goes wrong, or when it starts to fail, or when you start to see the toxic parts of that turn up, is when it's in direct conflict with what is happening at the top. And that's when the clear vision, the clear communication really has to be there.
Thank you, Natasha. That was wonderful. All right. I am going to switch us. And I'm going to start with you, Sara. At the end of the day, you know, as a practitioner, you know, how do you take care of yourself, and who you go to for support?
So I'm ready this time, and I have a book recommendation again. I'm going to drop it into the chat. But there is a book called Burnout. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about just the first couple of chapters, the talks kind of like to Natasha's point that while the current world of work has evolved in some way, the systems that we're used to haven't caught up at the same speed. And that's true also for the way that our bodies and brains function. So one of the highlights in this book is about how when we would have like a stress factor from way, way back in the day. Maybe it's because a lion was chasing us. You would run and run and run and run until either you got eaten, stress is gone, or you escaped, and all of a sudden your heart rate comes back down. But in our modern world of work, our stress levels go really, really high. And then you go back home and you're just perseverating on that thing. And then you wake up the next morning and you go right back into that stress. And so your body never has a chance to actually come down from that stress level. And for your brain to say, like, I've escaped XYZ. And one of the referrals, actually, or recommendations in the burnout book is exercise. So building that actually into your day, taking a quick walk around the block, even just like tensing your muscles and letting it go, taking those deep breaths, are some ways that sometimes when culture is kind of going awry, you've got to figure out how to pull yourself back in. So I think like there is an actual physical component around managing stress and supporting yourself in these really big, hard, difficult problems. But then also I think the second thing that I try to think about is not letting work culture define who I am, and choosing the culture that I want to have define who I am, which for me is my family culture and it's my community culture, and it's very much disconnected from work. And so leaning further into that and recognizing where maybe I'm outside of my locus of control in changing things at the speed I want to in a particular work environment doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying. I still will, but I'm not going to just say like, okay, that's it. Like my whole identity is wrapped up around this thing. That's when I turn outside to the things that really fill me.
I love that. Yeah, I share that ethos. Thank you, Sara. Del, I see you've come off the mic.
Yeah, I am muted. My dogs were barking, so which is funny that you asked this question at the time that they would choose to bark. For me, I love a good alliteration, right? So for me, it's my pets, my people, and my practices. And so serotonin, we all know we need doses of serotonin to calm us and to make us able to deal with what is in the environment that might be causing us stress. And so I have dogs, and I will give them a big hug and get all the dog love to just bring me down from a very stressful moment. That's pretty simple. Practices for me, I practice gratitude. When I am overwhelmed or I am really frustrated or I am really down, I try to root myself in what am I grateful for? There's always things that I can be grateful for. The fact that I'm breathing today is one of them. And so I find that, and not in a toxic positivity kind of way, but just a other side of the coin. So I try to practice gratitude every day, especially in those moments where I might be frustrated or feeling really burned out. And the other one is people. And I use this analogy. I have what I call my blind spot mirrors that are a small group of people in my life that check my blind spots before I change lanes. And those lanes might be changing my attitude, getting frustrated, making a career move, making a move across the country like I did in COVID. And they know me, they know my values, they know my pitfalls, and they can help project things to me to consider before I make a bad move or an unthought of move. So those three things help me not feel so burned out or feel so alone in all the choices that we make in the workplace and at home.
I love that. Thank you. I'll say this to everyone. Right before we all joined, Dale and I had a moment, and Dale shared with me that I got to share this quote, Dale, because it was amazing. Dale said that today is a good day to have a good day. And it was just, we're all super busy, a lot of competing priorities. And while it might have, seemed small, but it was that small moment that took up like my whole heart. It just meant so much. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Coming to you, Natasha, and we'll wrap with Becky.
Okay, I have a couple of things that I tend to do. One of the things about being a people person is that it can be a very isolating role, particularly if you work in a startup and you're the only person who can see what you see, and you're constantly working in conflict sometimes, depending on your organization. And I learned this little acronym, and it's simply to stop. So I do that. If I'm feeling triggered or if I'm feeling, a bit fraught, I stop. I then take a breath and then I observe. And what I observe is this: am I feeling seen? Am I feeling heard? Am I feeling valued? And am I understood? And I'll check in with myself along those things. And I'll always ask myself to figure out exactly what it is that is triggering or creating a reaction in the moment. And then at that point, I usually pivot. So when I pivot, I usually either walk away and I say, not now, I'll deal with that later, or I'll change my approach. I'm a huge, huge fan of Maya Angelou. I will quote her till the end of my days. If you cannot change the situation, you have to change your approach to the situation, and that's your pivot. Okay, so those are things. The second thing that I will up to do is I have made commitments to myself. What can I commit to for 15 minutes each day? Or what can I commit to for half an hour, 2 to 3 times a week? What will I commit to for, say, an hour a week? And what will I commit to for 1 week, every couple of months or something like that? So I make promises and commitments to myself as well, things that I know I can uphold, starting with 15 minutes and then breaking it out to longer. So those are my sort of well-being practices.
Thank you, Natasha. Becky, over to you.
Sara hit it right off. I move my body all the time. Most days I have my, I don't know if you can see, off my left shoulder, I have my little home gym. But let me tell you, for somebody who just needs to sometimes like move the stress out, kickboxing does wonders. You can imagine a word, you can imagine a person, you can imagine whatever you want to imagine. And then you don't get the police called for actually, going after somebody. Not that I would ever. So move your body for sure. It sounds so like the most basic advice ever, but it really does wonders. And I do it in the middle of the day. I take my morning for deep work, exercise in the middle, and then in the afternoon I have all of my meetings and my calls and things like that. So it's working at a remote async flexible company has just been wonders for that. Also, the second most basic advice, if you have access and means, please go to therapy. Therapists are there. They're professionals to help you see sides of you that you can't see on your own. That's what they do. And it's just fantastic to have somebody ask you the exact right question that you need to be asked with no judgment and no strings at the time that you need to be asked it. So I cannot say enough for that. And then last, like Jessie, I am an extreme extrovert. So even though I'm a quote unquote people person during the day, I need my people because we all have our HR face on during the day, right? You can't say the thing really that's back there. You need to call your friend and say, you will not believe what so-and-so just said. And I have my person. She's wonderful. She's also been HR department of one, and we know all the people that each other work with, and we're there for each other. And that's really wonderful, just to be able to let the HR guard down and be who you are in community. And I met her through an HR community. So these friendships are real. We have now visited each other across country lines. So find your community and hold on dearly to them.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Thank you. We have a few minutes left. There is a question in the chat. So I do want to leave space for a few questions before we wrap up with our one words. And this is from Sara from the community, from a chat. It is question for the panel. If there's time, there is time. If you're looking to work with for an org, what's best way to truly suss out an org's culture?
I just went through this process of applying to jobs over the summer and spoke to a lot of people. And there are a couple of questions I consistently asked that were helpful to me. One of which was, tell me about why you're hiring for this role in particular right now. And then I would ask about the person who held a role previous to me. So why did they leave? What were their biggest struggles? How did other people react to that person? Like I would take full advantage at the end of interviews where they ask you that question. Do you have any questions? They'd be like, I have about 7. But I would never ever ask the question, tell me about your culture, because it's very easy to give a sort of canned response or just talk about values, but not really get into the nitty-gritty. So my advice would be find out what matters to you and then ask really targeted questions about that. And for me, it was about the people I would work with.
Thank you, Sara.
Love that, Sara. I'm going to piggyback on that. I think if you ask about the culture, the best thing you can do is follow that up with questions, deeper questions that will tell me how that shows up. How did that show up in your last interaction? Or like you said, with the last person that held the role. I feel like there's been a lot of talk out in the virtual world about whether people should talk to former employees. I don't know that I really subscribe to that because everyone brings their own perspective and experiences to former employers. But what I do think that if you look at how you are treated in the hiring and recruiting process from your company, you can glean a lot of insight into how that company works. I read something and I actually reposted it on LinkedIn that was very, I thought, insightful. And I don't remember the original poster, so forgive me for not giving due credit. But are you seeing clarity? Are you seeing clarity on who owns decisions? Are you seeing timeliness? Are you seeing responsiveness? Those kinds of things will tell you part of what you need to know about the culture of a company before you even accept a role.
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that.
There's one question I always would ask as well when I was interviewing. The values are always a big thing for me. And certainly I would always look at what the values of the company are, and I would go back and ask that question of the people interviewing me. Tell me, what is your favorite value of this company? What is your company's favorite value? And what are you doing to uphold it? So I will ask for that level of accountability. Certainly when you're recruiting for roles where you're directly reporting into a CEO or someone at that level or just below, if you're reporting to senior leadership, I think it's really important that you ask them, what do you do? Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. I'm going to take that for myself. Thank you, Natasha. There's one more question in the chat. If one or two of you want to.
Yeah. So Mario, I have a good one. The people want to know.
Yes,
I would always ask, how do decisions get made? Because it tells you, one, how, like what types of things the responder will tell you indicates what's important in the culture, but also you get an idea of power structure. You get an idea of how quickly things happen and what kind of scrutiny is going to come on your work, which to me are great indicators of what a culture is. Do you have a trusting culture where a lot of autonomy is given? Do you have a collaborative culture where everyone is involved in a decision? Do you have a top-down culture where the highest paid the highest paid person in the room is making all of the decisions? And I love that one. And what the responder decides to focus on in their answer is also a clue.
I like that. That's a really great insight. Thank you, Becky. We have one more question from Rebecca. As a recruiter, what is a good response when people ask about culture? I'm up front. Dale can attest to that and will explain what Sara says, but I can get that question a lot. Any thoughts on that from the group?
When I interview people, I actually lead with culture. So my questions will often be questions that tie culture in. So I'll say something like, one of our values or norms here is XYZ. Here's how you might experience it. How would you deal with a problem related to this? Or if we have a performance task, usually in the performance task, I link to what our values are. So that way it invites conversation about culture and it doesn't end up just being sort of like the tack on question at the end. And it gives the applicants more room to discuss culture in meaningful ways. So that's one. And then also to Natasha's point, when people ask that question at the end, even if I've given them those entry points, I usually point to our values and I'll talk about how certain values show up organizationally. And then I'll also be upfront that there are also subcultures that exist here. So your experience may not be my experience, but let me tell you a little bit about what it's like working on this team. So I try to be as transparent as I can, but I found that by feeding in cultural elements into the interview itself, can be helpful in allowing others to kind of see what it's like to actually work in the places where we are.
I love that. Thank you so much, Sara, and thank you so much, Becky, Dale, Natasha. I'm going to hand it over to Jessie, who's going to close us out with one last question, and then we're going to close out as a group.
So good. First of all, can we all come off mute if you are able to, and give the team just a round of applause? Thank you so much. So many woo! So many awesome words of wisdom and insights. And I don't know about you, but I'm taking notes over here. Okay, as a checkout, let's take just 30 seconds. I'm going to set a timer here. Type in one sentence that's still resonating with you that you're taking away from today. It could be about how you're feeling. It could be one little nugget of wisdom that you're taking away. Whatever it is, boil it down into one sentence. Don't press enter yet, and give me a thumbs up when you have it. Okay, so I'm going to set a timer. Give me a thumbs up when you've got it in the chat. One sentence to check out. Be some insight. It could be how you're doing, how you're feeling, whatever it is. All right. Getting closer. About 10 more seconds. All right. All right. We're going to press enter in 3, 2, 1. Enter. So good. Look at these. Ooh, a lot of people, you permit what you you promote what you permit. There's a lot of themes around that one. So good. All right. Let's keep the conversation going in People Geek Slack. I know some people had some more questions too. So, but Damari, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, and I know that we're right at time, and thank you all so much for jamming out with us today. Dale, Becky, Sara, and Natasha are in our People Geek Slack community. You can find them there. They're also on LinkedIn. I'm sure they don't mind you reaching out to them and having one-on-one conversations. And don't worry, we're bringing them back. And so we're going to continue this conversation, but I also, from all of us here at Culture Amp and the Culture First community, Dale, Becky, Natasha, Sara, thank you so much for lending your expertise. And I'm going to take Dale's word. Thank you so much for being a mouthpiece today, because we all needed this. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. And today is a good day to have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.